Generally, I don't like to listen to quacks. They bother me. But you know what? Sometimes they get things right. Let's go back for a moment to the 17th century and King Charles II. 1660, the Restoration, when he was restored to the monarchy after Oliver Cromwell had actually executed Charles I, who was Charles II's father. Now, Charles was very interested in science. In fact, early on in his life, he was tutored by William Harvey of circulatory fame. He's the one who discovered how blood circulates through the body. In any case, Charles heard about a man who was curing fevers in England. And this man, Robert Talbor, had published a book about curing agues, pains of all kinds and fevers. And Charles was intrigued, and he invited him to the court, and he interviewed him. And he was so impressed by Robert Talbor that he made him his own physician. This was a big concern for other doctors in the court because they thought that Talbor had no medical education. They called him a charlatan. Indeed, he didn't have any medical education. He was self-taught. Of course, the doctors at that time, what did they do? They bled patients, they purged patients, they cupped patients. They didn't do very much good. So anyway, Charles was very impressed by what he had read in this book, and Talbor became his physician. Now, nobody knew at that time what the secret remedy was that Talbor had come up with. It is true that cinchona bark was known at that time. The Jesuits had learned about its magical properties from natives in Peru, and they had imported it into Europe, calling it either Pope's powder or Jesuit powder. Today we know active ingredient is quinine. They didn't know that in those days. But it was a remedy against malaria, which was rampant in Europe at that time. Now, in his book, Talbor warned against the use of Jesuit bark because he said it had all kinds of side effects. And he obviously promoted his remedy. In France, the Dauphin, who was the son of the Sun King, Louis XIV, who happened to be Charles II's cousin, got sick with malaria. Then Charles sent Talbor, and he cured him. And he went on to cure the Queen of Spain, which was pretty impressive. And in fact, the French king, Louis XIV, was so impressed by Talbor that he wanted to buy the secret remedy. He wanted to spread it. Talbor didn't agree, but he said, you can do it after I am dead. And he got money from Louis while he was alive with the promise that the remedy would not be revealed until he was dead. Well, anyway, he died. And after he died, Louis published the remedy, first in French, and it was translated into English. And you know what? It turned out that this guy, who had been called a charlatan, who had been called a quack, had actually found a way to essentially standardize cinchona bark, the bark that of course, was the source of quinine. And although he railed against the use of the bark, his secret remedy was actually made of the same substance. So, in this case, the quack was actually right. Unfortunately, Charles got very sick at a rather young age. He was in his 50s, and he was cured by Talbor of malaria. But unfortunately, another disease then overtook. Charles, as I said, was really a great friend of science. He even established the Royal Society in England. And he had his own laboratory in which he carried out alchemical experiments with mercury. And it is believed that he actually died of mercury poisoning, which had affected his kidney. And when he was dying, his doctors bled him, and they purged him, and they cupped him. And that probably precipitated his death. And those were the same doctors who had called Talbor, who had published something that really worked. They had called him a quack.